everyone for being here on a Monday. I think what a great way to start off the week, kind of wiring our brains and learning a little bit about ourselves so that we can jump into the week ready to give and receive feedback as stronger, better humans. And it really just makes my heart happy when we can kind of rewire ourselves or use the things that we learn about our brains and the way we interact with other humans to make us better. So hopefully you guys will find some learning and some tidbits to take away from today. I do want to disclose that I volunteer for multiple AARC, CHA, and SPSS committees. I don't have any real or perceived conflicts of interest. I don't think I'm going to talk about any brand names today. If I do, it's not to endorse a specific product and really just to share a point of emphasis. So today we're going to talk about the neuroscience behind how the brain processes feedback, including the roles of threat response, neuroplasticity, and emotional regulation. We're going to recognize some common cognitive and emotional reactions to feedback and talk about how we can be more open and receptive even when things are really stressful. And then hopefully you'll leave with some practical tools and techniques for giving feedback more effectively, especially when you're communicating upward to more experienced colleagues or interdisciplinary team members, because oftentimes feedback is hard just in general, but it makes it even harder when we're having to have conversations with other respiratory therapists who are supposed to be precepting us or orienting us, or someone that's been in the field for 20, 30 years, or to a doctor, or hopefully leave with those tools and you'll be able to put them right into use. All right, so we're talking about human interactive science and other humans interact with other, and I think as we feedback with others and what we're going to like or dislike about other humans who we need to interact with, it's important to understand that in human interactive science, 1 in 4 people is going to love out of you. 2 in 4 people are going to tolerate being around you, and 1 in 4 people are absolutely going to hate your guts. And when you think about 4 people who are close, 4 people that you can put into those buckets, that's generally the way the brain is wired. And so you tend to spend more time around the people who are going to love the crap out of you. These are the people that are your home, they're your safe place, they're the people you know are going to support you no matter what. But the bulk of people that you interact with and that interact with you generally just tolerate being around you. When we think about how humans interact, there are things that help us understand why this happens. And so the Big 5 personality traits is something that we can use to help us understand how we can be better perceived or received by other humans. And you can remember this using an acronym called OCEAN, O being openness to change, C being conscientiousness, E extroversion, A agreeableness, and N neuroticism. And so these Big 5 personality traits have been studied over and over and over again. I'm using a graphic from L&Z Consulting, who I've worked with in the past, but you can find versions of this out on Google if you choose to. But generally, the things that are being displayed by other humans in terms of behaviors, what is in the green is what is most well received by other humans. So when you think about openness to change, if you are someone who is curious and interested and independent, this is going to be more well received than someone who is practical and prefers routine, or someone who's erratic or rigid and controlling. And so that's how you can use the green on this table to kind of help understand, if I'm doing something related to these Big 5 personality traits, how can I do it in a way that is most well received to other humans? Because if your brain is anything like mine, I'm trying to figure out how I make those 2 and 4 people who tolerate me want to engage with me, or those 1 in 4 people who really don't like me be able to tolerate me. And so as you think about conscientiousness, what's going to be most well received is someone who's hardworking and reliable and organized. You know that they're going to show up and they're going to be there, instead of someone who is careless and disorganized or insisting and reckless or impulsive. When you think about extroversion, someone who's outgoing and warm and inclusive is generally what we prefer seeing in other humans, whereas someone who's quiet or withdrawn or cool or loud are a little bit harder for us to deal with. And for agreeableness, you're looking for other humans to be helpful and empathetic and understanding. I see what you're going through. I want to help you make it better. Whereas someone who is suspicious or critical or naive are a little bit harder to deal with. And then for neuroticism, again, someone calm, secure, even-tempered. When you go to them, you know what you're going to get every time, versus someone who might be more moody or depressed or detached or have emotional outbursts. And so generally green is where we want to be when we're being professional humans in a workplace environment. But there are times when we can have reactions that are in the blue or in the red. And this is where it's harder for us to deal with other humans. So when you think about someone who's on your list of people who you generally don't like being around, 1 in 4 people, and you try and think about their behaviors and the things that they do, they're probably in one of these categories in blue or red. And if they were more green, it would make them easier to deal with. And so as we think about that, it's important to understand where your behaviors are, but also what behaviors we can coach up for other people to be easier to deal with as well. And once you have a little bit of understanding about how humans interact with each other and how these big 5 personality traits help that happen, you really want to make sure you understand what is your brand. You have to know what you want and who you are. When you interact with other people, whether you're giving feedback or a report or whatever the case may be, it's important that you think about what is your brand? What is your marketing campaign? How do you want people to remember you? And what are the things that you're trying to emulate, do, give off in your conversations with other people? And so part of my brand is being effective, down to earth, and professional. I want people to know when they come to me that I'm going to get things done. I'm going to follow up on my promises. I want them to know that I'm down to earth. I'm a respiratory therapist first. I have done and still do patient care. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I have a dog and a cat. I take my kids to sports. I've worked night shift. I've been in a variety of positions. So I am not going to do anything or ask my team to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And that's part of just being down to earth. I want to know that if it's hard, we can do hard together. And if we're going to celebrate wins, we're going to celebrate those together as well. And in all of that, I would like to be seen as professional. What I like to tell people to do when you think about your brand statement is to also think about what you're working on. And so for me, one of the things I'm working on is empathy. Not that I don't care for other people, but my personality style is very type A. It's the D dominant style on the DISC profile. And what that means is I generally am focused on getting things done. I told you effective is in part of my brand statement. So I like lists. I like to check them off. I like to complete tasks. And because of that, sometimes I miss the pause or the moments where I need to ask people how their kiddos are, or what's going on at home. And so early on in my leadership career, that was something that I put on my agendas. What's our connection here? Let's talk about home. And we took 5 to 10 minutes out of those meetings to talk about those things because I knew it was something that I needed to be better at. If you're struggling with a brand statement and figuring out kind of who you are and what you want or what you need to work on, there's a variety of different tools available. They're free, they're online. Your schools might have them, your organizations may have them. DISC is just one version of that. There's Myers-Briggs, MBI. There's a whole bunch of different personality assessment tools to help you understand a little bit more about yourself. And if you're going to leave with a piece of advice, understanding more about yourself is really the first step to being better in your interactions with other people and giving and receiving feedback. Making yourself the predictable part of that equation is super helpful. And then once you learn a little bit about yourself, you really need to understand why. Why are you where you're at doing what you're doing? What is the purpose of all of this, and why do we need to be able to give and receive feedback? So you have to have some kind of shared understanding of whatever role that you're in. If you are a student, you need to understand what are your responsibilities while you are a student and someone who's representing your university and the respiratory care profession. What's your responsibility? And some form of a mission, vision, or a personal reason for doing what you're doing. Why is it important to you to do this successfully? Why is it important for you to have others perceive you in a certain way? And then this shared motivational comprehension, especially in healthcare, becomes absolutely a point where we can all connect together. Because at the end of the day, everyone is in healthcare because they want to help patients. And everything that we're talking about today, feedback, difficult conversations, at the end of the day will all help patients. And so when you think about feedback, feedback generally makes people stressed. When someone is coming to tell you that you maybe didn't do the best job you could do, or you need to tell them that they didn't do the best job that they could do, this causes a stress response in your body. And there are a few things that you need to understand about stress to understand what happens in your body. But the first is that everyone's stressors are different. Absolutely everyone has a stress response because of different reasons. So I'll be vulnerable again and share with you that I don't like driving below or at the speed limit. I prefer to be driving above the speed limit. In fact, my preferred method of transportation is teleportation. It doesn't exist yet. We waste so much time in our cars. It just makes me stressed out. But there are some people where driving over the speed limit would cause them that same stress. So everyone's stressors are different. However, once you encounter that stressor as a human, the stress response in your body for every human on the face of the earth is the exact same. And the stress response is on or off, and there is no way to kind of titrate that. It is 1 or 0, pass or fail, pass go, collect $200, don't pass go, don't collect $200. So once you are stressed or you encounter that stressor, your body's natural response is the same for every person. And a perceived threat is exactly the same as an actual threat. So if I'm in an Uber being driven around the city and I think we're supposed to be turning left, but instead the Uber driver turns right and I think I'm going to be kidnapped, then the stress response I'm going to have is the same as if I was actually being kidnapped. And when your body decides that you are stressed, a few things happen. So first, your fast response to stress kicks in, and this is your sympathetic adrenal medullary axis. And here, your body starts secreting epinephrine and norepinephrine. These are all the things that happen, very stereotypical, right? Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, you might get a little bit diaphoretic. Generally, you know when epinephrine and norepinephrine are coursing through your veins. However, when that starts to happen, your body goes, oh, this is not okay. We can't do this forever. Because if everyone was walking around on Earth having stress responses and epinephrine and norepinephrine were your only responses, everyone would be walking around with high heart rates. Cardiology would be the highest profession in healthcare. Everyone would be having heart attacks, and eventually the human race would be extinct. So your body knows you can't do this forever. And so as it tries to help you out, it activates your slow response to stress, which is your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And here your adrenal glands start secreting ACTH, which you all learned about in biology. And ACTH starts secreting the hormone cortisol. Cortisol is your body's slow response to stress, and it is the steady fuel that you need to be a functional human or somewhat functional when you're dealing with a stressful situation. Again, your body doesn't know the difference if you are quite literally getting ready to be mauled by a lion or if you are walking out into your suburban neighborhood and your car battery is dead. It only knows how to activate this one way, on or off, and this happens every single time. And generally, feedback is hard, and it's because it's stressful. So all of a sudden, we know we have to give feedback. We get stressed about it. Epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, all these things start happening in our body. And then we get stuck in a room with someone where we have to tell them that they need to do better, or we have to hear that we need to do better. And I want everyone to take a deep breath and understand that you're not the only ones that feel like feedback is hard. HBR had a Harris poll in 2016, and what they found is almost 70% of managers say they're uncomfortable communicating, not giving feedback, communicating with their employees. This is like, I don't know if I should talk about the weather. And if I talk about something like the weather, are people going to think that I don't care enough about them, or I'm only sticking to safe topics, or I'm not a human? But if I tell them too much about myself, are they going to use it against me later? Like, this is just general communication. And almost 40% of managers say they're uncomfortable having to give direct feedback about their employees' performance if they think that person may respond poorly. Quite literally, the job that people are being paid to do, there's over a third of managers that say we're not going to tell them they're doing a bad job because feedback is stressful. However, you guys all know that feedback is important. And we have to give it. It's important because it helps guide staff performance. It creates a workplace culture with high levels of psychological safety. If we give the feedback the right way, it can decrease burnout and turnover. If we don't, it can increase burnout and turnover. Feedback directly impacts patient safety. So if we don't tell people that, their compressions aren't deep enough or fast enough, then potentially our patients could not survive a catastrophic event. Feedback also creates some legal protection. It fuels evolution. We don't get better. We don't hear things and make changes, then we're just going to stay the way that we are. And at the end of the day, lack of feedback is permission. If you were doing something that was upsetting someone, you'd want them to tell you so that you could talk about it and potentially not do it again. If someone is doing something that's not aligned with what you need them to do or it's upsetting you, when you don't give them feedback, you are giving them permission to continue doing whatever they're doing that was upsetting you or not aligned with policies, etc. One time, 10 times, 100 times. If you don't give them feedback, we're giving them permission to keep doing it over and over and over again. And so it's really important. But people do struggle giving feedback because it's awkward or uncomfortable, or they're trying to avoid the conflict, or they're not sure what's going to happen once they say it and they don't want to know. It could be too intense or too emotional, or they're not sure how to say exactly what they need to say. And oftentimes people struggle giving feedback because they don't have the right skills to do it. I don't know how to address it, what to say, where to say it, and I'm unsure, so I'm going to avoid it. When we're stressed, though, it actually causes it to be harder to give feedback the right way, because when we're stressed, we change brain states. I'm using some graphics today from Conscious Discipline, which is a parenting company. They do a lot with parents and early childhood education, but you can find versions of this in any manner all over Google. But generally, when you think about like the larger portions of the brain, you have three brain states: your survival state, your emotional state, and your executive state. And your survival state is the brainstem. The brainstem's job is to decide if you are safe. The only thing that your brainstem is asking all day, every day is, am I safe? And things that cause your brainstem to start having to make these decisions are perceived or real threats. I think I'm in danger, or I am in danger. And once your brain believes that you're in danger, it needs to decide, am I safe, and how do I get to a place of safety? The brainstem then allows us to either fight, flight, freeze, flee, essentially, are the things that we can do when we're making decisions from our brainstem. And every human has a brainstem. They make these decisions. Their brain cares if they're safe. The emotional state, or the center portion of our brain, is really the limbic system. This is where our amygdala is, and this is our feeling center. When you're thinking about your emotional state, the need is connection. As humans, we want to connect with other humans. And the limbic system is asking over and over and over again, am I loved? Things that cause us to use our emotional state and have a whole lot of big feelings are when things don't go our way. And shocker, that happens a whole lot for humans in today's society. Plenty of things have already happened this morning that have not gone my way. And so when things don't go our way, we get into our feelings. Why would this happen to me? How could someone do this to me? And the behaviors that happen are verbal and social aggression, guilt, and blame and shame. And this starts developing almost immediately after birth. And it is true child mode. If any of you have children or younger siblings, if you want them to eat the dinner that you prepared for them, that is a well-balanced meal of all the things they need to be a healthy child, and they would like to have ice cream for dinner, all of the things that are going to happen are verbal social aggression, guilt, and blame. So somehow they might flip their plate over, push food off of it, throw a fork across the room, end up on the ground, kind of kicking and screaming. And if they have some pretty intact verbal skills, they're going to tell you what an awful parent you are because you want them to starve and you never provide them any real sustenance, and they're wasting away to nothing, and you hate them and you want them to die, whatever the case may be. These are all the things that happen because they're in their feelings. And then your executive state are your prefrontal lobes. And this is where we do the best of our thinking. And our prefrontal lobes are really trying to help us solve problems in social settings by asking the question, what can I learn? The trigger here to start using our prefrontal cortex a lot of times is disagreement. And our prefrontal lobes start responding by complaining, which is absolutely awful for us as humans. But what happens quickly is we complain because we don't agree with something. I can't believe they changed that policy. I can't believe we now have to, carry these 13 items with us or clock in at this time. And then our executive state or our prefrontal lobe starts going, well, how do we solve this problem? I wonder why they did this. If I'm feeling this way, I wonder how my coworkers or my colleagues are feeling. And that's probably unfair to them or all of us or whatever way they were thinking. And what if we made this 10% better tomorrow? Or what if this problem disappeared? Your prefrontal lobes, though, don't fully develop until age 26. You can use them before then, but it's not going to be as consistent. And all of these skills, the more you use them, the easier it is to have automatic responses. But we really need all three parts of our brain in order to engage in feedback and be healthy, functional humans, because we wouldn't be a civilized society today if our brain didn't care if we were safe. We wouldn't have emotional connection and support systems and families like we do if we didn't care about feeling. And we wouldn't have advanced to the way we have as humans with indoor plumbing and air conditioning and AI tools if we weren't trying to solve problems. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, what person you're dealing with, how amazing you think they are, how flighty or feely you think they are. There's no one in the world who only uses one part of their brain. I don't know how many of you are football fans or Taylor Swift fans or Andy Reid, Go Birds fans, but the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl, I believe it was 2 years ago now, and they were losing. Travis Kelce was not in the game, and he came off the field and he chest bumped Coach Andy Reid, who is wearing the wrong colors, Go Birds. And he very clearly in this picture is whispering sweet nothings into his ear about his discontentment with whatever's going on. And so I'm curious if you guys can use the chat to tell me if you were to guess which brain state Travis Kelce was in this moment, which one do you think it is? Do you think he was in his brainstem, his emotional state, or his prefrontal cortex? Awesome. Seeing some responses, emotional. Yeah. So when Travis Kelce is coming off the field, he doesn't fight, flight, freeze. He's not in his brainstem trying to decide is he safe because he didn't, physically assault anyone or sit down on the bench, take his helmet off, refuse to play, or go back to the locker room and leave the stadium. But he's definitely not using his prefrontal lobe because this is not what can I learn? And some of you might go, really emotional state? He's asking, am I loved? Absolutely. This is the picture perfect example of am I loved? Coach, please use me, need me, put me in the game. Let me help the team win. I want to feel like you love me and you need me. And this is exactly what is happening in this scenario. It is the reason why Snickers commercials are a thing, because this is what happens in normal human behavior. Okay. So when you think about all of this, you're going to operate as a human and a respiratory therapist in all three brain states. You're going to need to give feedback, whether it's to your patients or your coworkers or interdisciplinary colleagues. And we know that all of that is going to be stressful. So what do we do about it? This is like good news, bad news. So some practical tips for self-regulation and growth. The good news is it's more about you than it is about them. And so getting to know yourself, understanding the things that are happening in your body and controlling what you can about your responses is really the biggest part of this equation. And some of the things you can do to do that are naming and understanding your emotions and your stressors and being able and willing to reflect on them often. And so Robert Plutnik in the 1980s started a lot of research related to emotional labeling and emotional vocabulary. Affect labeling is the term for it, where you can, again, find millions of versions of this available online. I actually have one that's like 3D printed in my office. And UCLA did some studies on this. I think it was in about the 1990s, and they did some functional MRI scans. What they did is they had people view really negative images of things going on around them. And in these functional MRIs, they had them label their emotions. And one group of participants got something similar to this, where they were given names of emotions and they could kind of think through them and pick ones that aligned with what they were seeing and feeling. And another group did not get those tools. And what they found is in the group who was successfully able to affect label or name their emotions, they were using more neural firing in their prefrontal lobes, trying to solve the problem and kind of link the word to the image and their feelings, versus the group that did not have these tools had more neural wiring lighting up in the middle part of their brain where they were emotional. So when we think about all this touchy-feely stuff, emotional intelligence and emotional quotient is your ability to understand and manage the emotions of yourself and others. It is our job to be able to manage our emotions, but then also have some ability to manage and understand the emotions of other people, even if they're not feeling the exact same way that we are. And so what does this mean for respiratory therapists? Emotional intelligence helps you control your emotions and lead others. It also, even if you're not a leader, helps promote a positive environment. Emotional intelligence increases effective communication because I can understand what I'm saying in a clear way, but I can also understand if you disagree with me. It helps keep companies competitive and viable and run smoother. It really starts with being empathetic and helping others feel visible and heard. And it creates this culture of self-awareness where I know I'm not a perfect human and I'm going to make mistakes, but I want to learn from them, where we can eliminate excessive emotional volatility and lead to high trust, psychological safety, and high expectations. And it allows us to meet workplace challenges. But in today's day and age, emotional intelligence really is just a common courtesy. It's something we all have to do to be better as we interact with others. And so while you're managing your emotions and giving feedback, it's going to be hard work. It's not easy. If it was easy, we wouldn't have to reflect. We would always be perfect all the time, but that would make life a whole lot less fun, because part of the fun in life is being human and not being perfect. You're never going to be 100% perfect at it, but I want you to know that you should always give feedback, because lack of feedback is permission. But no matter what you need to say, there is a clear and kind way to say it. And the data tells us that people want negative feedback. If you put yourself in that position, you would always want someone to tell you. HBR did another study where they looked at people's tendency to prefer or tendency to avoid wanting to give or receive positive and negative feedback. And what they found is there was a very negligible tendency, 0.1, and this was a +5 to a -5 scale, a 0.1 tendency to prefer giving positive feedback. People wanted to, just barely, come tell me that I'm awesome. When it talked about giving negative feedback, there was a -2.3 tendency to avoid wanting to give negative feedback. So most people are avoiding giving that negative feedback, even if they would want it themselves. And that's exactly what the data shows, because that same group of people had a 2.3 tendency to prefer wanting to receive positive feedback. Tell me how awesome I am. But when you look at the tendency to prefer receiving negative feedback, it was more than double. At a +4.7, people want to receive negative feedback more than anything else, more than receiving positive feedback, more than giving negative feedback or giving positive feedback. They would rather you tell them that they're leaving a path of chaos and destruction behind them so that they can fix it. If you're still going, I know the data tells me I'm supposed to give the feedback, but I still am not sure how it's going to go. If you feel like you need a little bit of bolstering, then trust is something that can help you. So if you haven't seen the trust Venn diagram, I found this very early in my leadership journey from a coach that I saw who shared when we don't trust other people, it's generally because of one of these three things. And when you think about someone in your life, personal or professional, who you don't trust, generally you can find the fault in one or more of these buckets. So in order to have trust with someone, we need to believe that they are sincere. Do they really care about you? They need to be competent. So they have to be able to go do the things, and they have to be reliable. And if you think you're struggling with trust in a relationship, it's probably one of these three buckets that need additional help and support. And trust is really important in the feedback conversation because it helps us manage all of the things related to the negative effects of avoidance and feedback delivery. So compared with people at low trust companies, people at high trust companies report 74% less stress, 106% more energy at work, higher productivity by about 50%, 13% fewer sick days, 76% more engagement, almost 30% more overall satisfaction just with their lives in general, and 40% less burnout. And in this study, it was an oxytocin study and it was blinded. What happened was they had a subject, so they called someone and they were like, hey, Heather, we're going to give you an amount of money to send to a stranger. You're going to send it over the computer, so electronically. You're not going to know who this person is, but I want you to know that when you send it, it's going to triple. And it's up to the person you send it to on if they choose to share it or not. And so here's $1 million. It could turn into 3 or it might stay 1 million. And then they drew blood for these participants for their oxytocin levels before and immediately after they made the decisions to trust others or to be trustworthy. And what they found were the people in this study who sent higher dollar amounts of money had higher levels of oxytocin in their blood. And then in a second study, they used oxytocin nasal spray before they let you choose the amount of money that you were sending electronically to a stranger. And they found that the people who received the nasal spray actually doubled the amount of money they sent to a stranger while remaining cognitively intact. So overall, oxytocin reduces the fear of trusting even someone you know nothing about, in this case, a stranger. And I don't know about you, but I was like, okay, well, how do I get oxytocin nasal spray in my office so I can give it to everyone who comes to see me all day, every day? But oxytocin really increases empathy. So when we're having to give feedback or have difficult conversations, the more we can do to increase trust, the better those conversations go. And when we're stressed because we have to give feedback or we're in a feedback situation, stress is actually an oxytocin inhibitor. So these things don't go well together. It's kind of like oil and water. So how do you manage trust? Whether you're a leader or you're just starting out in your career, you cultivate trust by being clear in your direction, giving people what they need to see it through, and getting out of the way. People in my department know, I say it often, it's our job to treat everyone like responsible adults. So if I treat everyone at work like responsible adults, then that means I assume that everyone is doing the right things and following up and renewing their license and getting their CEUs, and they can keep up with their workload in their area, and they're going to call me if they need help, because that is what trust is. And so when you feel like you have something to share with someone, you've evaluated kind of who you are a little bit, and you've evaluated the trust in that relationship, how do you actually give the feedback? So feedback really can be a gift, and it can change someone's life for the better, or it can be a source of shame and conflict. And it really depends on how we share it in the way that it's received. So this communication can obviously happen at a variety of different places. So we can schedule time to give someone feedback. We can give it in a team meeting. We can give it in person. We can give it over the phone, in email. We can give it at huddles in the morning, or we can actually even give feedback in a nonverbal way by rolling our eyes and crossing our arms or turning and walking away from someone without even saying anything at all. But communication really involves what you say, so the words that are coming out of your mouth, how you say it, what kind of tone, how quickly, where you put emphasis. But probably the bigger portion of this is receptivity, how the other person receives what you say and how you say it. And in order to establish receptivity when you need to give feedback, we need to get people and ourselves into our prefrontal cortex. We need to be thinking about how do we solve a problem? How do we make this process better? How do we ensure our patients are safer? And ways to do that are to de-escalate, depersonalize. This isn't about you. This is about a process. This is about a policy. This is about keeping our patients safe. And what you bring into the conversation is exactly what you're going to get back. So if I go into the conversation at an 8 out of 10 on the Richter scale, I'm going to get back an 8 or higher on the Richter scale. It is our job to try and be a 3 out of 10 and make sure that we're coming in where it's not you wronged me, it's your fault, it's how do we fix this together and shift from fight flight to stay and play. So out of the amygdala into the prefrontal cortex where we're focusing on increasing problem solving, and this is how we establish better receptivity. If you're like, that's wonderful, but I'm not exactly sure how to say that. Things that are going to help you establish receptivity are when we're calm. So you can practice before you need to give feedback, say it 10 times, make sure you say it without getting faster, without your voice getting louder. You can practice making it clear, and you guys can use tools to help you do this. So you can kind of type in Copilot or ChatGPT or Google Gemini and say, look, here's the feedback I need to give. Help me make it more clear. I don't want to talk for 10 minutes about what's going wrong. I want to say it in 60 seconds. How can I make it more palatable and proactive and fair? How do I make it not about me or them, but about partnering and solving the problem? Things that are not going to work to establish receptivity and get the person you need to talk to into their prefrontal cortex are things like aggression. If we tell them this is unacceptable, it's urgent, and we need to fix it yesterday. If we're intense or if we're emotional, if we're talking about how this makes me feel so disappointed in them, then I become manipulative. If I avoid having the conversation altogether or someone is upset in the conversation, so I tell them, you know what, just never mind, you're perfect. Or if I get defensive and I can't believe that you said that about me. Or if I take it personally. So in order to get to green on our big 5 personality trait scale, where we're doing all the things that make us better, well received by other humans, we need to be able to drop the intensity. We need to be able to get to a 3 out of 10 and focus on the issue, not the person, and move the issue forward. And in these conversations, it's good to pause beforehand and just understand that we should be ready to respect differences. This can't only work for people when we don't have differences. You know, we think about a few people, yeah, I always go to them and I give them feedback and it always works out really well. But then in this situation with another person, it always goes poorly. It's important as you think about feedback, either giving or receiving, when you're attempting to change someone else, and that is the only goal, we're probably not considering all other perspectives because we also should be allowing ourselves to be changed by others. And so more curiosity, more emotional intelligence, how do you feel? Help me understand your perspective, and getting curious instead of furious. It's not judgmental, it's help me understand what you're seeing and feeling, and I want to understand how you see and feel this differently than I do. Because generally there are many truths of human interaction. There's your truth, there's their truth, there's someone else's truth, and this all comes from differences in everyone's lived experiences. I grew up a certain way, and that has shaped how I perceive events that happen in the world. And the best way to explain this in 30 seconds is room temperature. How many people live with someone where you're fighting over the thermostat because you're hot and they're cold, or everyone thinks the temperature should be something different? When you think about giving and receiving feedback and having conversations with other people where we're all trying to grow and get better, it's important that we don't force our temperature onto others. We don't force our perception or our truth of that specific human interaction on someone else. I can be cold while you're hot, and that's true and okay to each person in that scenario. And so if you're still like, okay, but how do I get curious? What things can I say? The best thing you can do going into difficult conversations is to know what you're going to say and to have tips and tricks and language that you can use if things don't go as you expect. So, how are you? What's working? What are you thinking? What does this look like in your experience when you have this assignment? You can always ask for permission. Do you have a few moments? Can I share some feedback with you? Some people see this. What do you see? What are your thoughts about what I'm saying? Do you think this is always the case, or are there times where this maybe doesn't happen this way? What if we tried something like this? How would that work for you? And then in these situations, there's always an it. There's always something we want to change. If you don't know it going into the conversations, find the it and then clarify your solutions. What are the 3 things that would make this better? What are the 2 things we can try? How do we de-escalate, depersonalize, and strategize? You focus on what we're going to do, what we're going to try. How would this feel if this looked like this tomorrow, if we tried this new tool? And it sounds like we have these goals. This is our process. These are our procedures, our patient needs. Here's our expectations or institutional values, or we're on this journey of continuous improvement. What it doesn't sound like, or what's not going to work in these situations, is when we're emotional. I'm really worried about you. I'm frustrated that this isn't going better. I'm disappointed in the way, that you're bringing yourself to work. Or when we personalize it, if we make it, I'm mad, I'm upset, I'm disappointed, you should have, he should have, she should have, all of this is going to derail everyone, get us out of our prefrontal cortex into our amygdala and our emotional center, and we're going to start responding with blame, shame, verbal, and social aggression. And what this leads to in workplaces is gossiping and co-rumination, which changes culture in teams, and ultimately places that have poor culture and negativity have worse patient outcomes. So if things are escalating and you need some tips or tools, we can always pause. If you do not pause, no free will. If things aren't going well, be ready to share something. This isn't going the way I thought it would. I think maybe we need to stop and loop back tomorrow. Or, I wonder. Help me understand. Let's stay together in this. I want to work through this with you. Because ultimately, if you expect it and believe it and think it forward, that's what's going to change behavior. It's important for our patients. I know we can meet this mark, and I want to do it together. How do we make the next time we work together better? Because generally, what makes people more difficult, and this is true especially in healthcare, is that we have some personal pitfalls as humans where we try and do one of these things on Karpman's drama triangle. You can find a whole lot of research out there on Karpman's drama triangle if you're interested, but generally what happens when we get into giving feedback and what makes it kind of turn into drama and chaos is we end up in one of these roles on Karpman's drama triangle. So we either become the victim, where here I'm talking about poor me, I'm complaining and whining, and I can't believe they did this to me. Maybe I came to work today or into my clinical assignment for today, and I realized I was supposed to be in the PICU, but someone moved me to the CICU. I can become the victim in that scenario by going, I was supposed to be in the PICU today. This is so unfair. I can't believe they did this to me, and I can't do anything about it. And generally, what humans do is they go find their friend or their colleague or another student, and that person becomes a rescuer. And they go, can you believe that they moved my assignment from the PICU to the CICU today? How unfair is that? And then because humans like to connect with other humans, generally that friend or colleague or whoever is going to say, I know, right? They did that to me last week at that other clinical site. Can you believe that? And now we have a victim being rescued by someone, and together they generally persecute someone. It's the leadership, it's the clinical instructor, it's, the preceptor, whatever, has inflicted this pain upon someone else because we've engaged in drama instead of just going, there's probably a really good reason that my assignment was moved today and it's a bummer, but I'm going to make the best of it. So if you're looking for some tips on how to give feedback, I'm going to give you some of my favorite tools. The goal is to always be focused, intentional, and prepared. If you are trying to figure out, do I need to give this feedback? The Quaker 4 is a tool that you can use to help you out. The Quaker 4 is based on Rumi's 3 gates of speech, and it really asks a few questions. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And is it productive? I always tell people to pause a little bit on the is it true, because Sometimes your brain makes up stories, so they always move my assignment. I can't believe they moved me from the PICU to the CICU. Is it always true? Have they moved your assignment every day? Or is it sometimes not true? Do sometimes you think you're going to be in a place and that's where you actually end up? Can I give whatever this feedback is in a kind way? If you can't give it in a kind way, then you're not ready. You're not a 3 out of 10. Is it necessary? Do I need to tell someone this piece of feedback? Is it going to impact patient safety or culture or team dynamics if I don't? And is it productive? If you are struggling with how do I say what I need to say, the Dear Man tool is something that can help you. Dear Man is an acronym that stands for describing the data, expressing the impact, asking, restating, being mindful, appearing confident, calm, and collaborative, and negotiating. So if you're thinking about someone you need to give feedback to or something that's bothering you, so if someone is late to work or late to clinical, I can describe the data. You were supposed to be at clinical 3 days this week. You were late 2 out of the 3. What is the impact? When you are late 2 out of 3 days, that is how people are learning your name in a potential place where you may seek employment in the future. It also could delay patient care if the clinical site is trying to find out where you're at in the morning and they're waiting to go get report until they figure out if you're there. I want to ask or assert that you show up to your clinical sites on time. So you were late 2 times this week. It's impacting the team. I'm not sure it's making the best impression. Next week, we need to be on time all 3 days. I want to be mindful you might have some things going on this week, but let's talk about them. And now we can negotiate what's negotiable. It may absolutely be non-negotiable that someone has to show up to work on time. However, we may be able to negotiate which clinical site you go to this week. If you're having car trouble and borrowing someone's car or needing to take the bus, maybe there's a closer clinical site and we can do something. As long as you're at clinical on time, it maybe doesn't matter which clinical site you're at. So you can figure out at that point what you need to negotiate. And then if you are feeling like, poor me, sitting in that carbon drama triangle, thinking that you're the victim, Q-tip is something you can use to help you just kind of reset your brain. And Q-tip is quit taking it personally. Generally, people do not make decisions to spite other people. There's a whole lot of things in your brain that cause you to make decisions. You're not late to work because you want to make your clinical site mad or because you want someone to have to write you up. You are late because all of these other things happened in your life that got you there. So if you need something to kind of reset yourself when you're feeling like, poor me, why does everyone hate me? Quit taking it personally. It's just a quick reset so that you know it's not, I shouldn't take it personally. There's probably a really good reason this happened, and it probably has nothing to do with me, quite honestly. Because our goal is to stay out of the drama. And so if you find yourself in this poor me, can you believe? Generally, what we can do is level set and go, okay, quit taking it personally. How do I make this a problem that I solve? How do I make this better? How does it look different? If someone's coming to you and saying, can you believe, instead of saying, I know, right? What we can do is say, how are you going to address this? Do you want to talk through what you could say to ask questions to try and make this better next time? Because the goal really in all of these feedback conversations is to be a scientist of human behaviors. And your research question here is, what is the very important reason? Why could someone have done something? What is the very important reason that this could have happened? And we do this all day, every day with patients in respiratory care where we're trying to figure out what is the reason the ventilator graphics look wrong? Or why is the patient still wheezing after I've done these interventions? And if we can think about that in the same way we interact with other people at work and at home or at the grocery store, it doesn't matter. What is the very important reason? It generally gets us into our prefrontal cortex and keeps us thinking about how we answer that question and how we solve the problem. And you have a few options when it comes to feedback and giving and receiving feedback. You can stay stuck. You can just say, you know what, life sucks and I don't like feedback and I'm not going to do it. But you're not going to get anywhere. You can change it. So you can either give the feedback, influence others, sow the seeds for change, or you can decide to accept it. Are you in a situation where lack of feedback is permission and you're okay with that? I'm not going to say anything. And you know what? If they do it 100 more times, it's okay. No one's dying. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. These are your options when you know you need to give feedback. Stay stuck, change it, or accept it. So hopefully you have a few tools, a few ways to think about things differently. But as we kind of wrap up today, science is pretty cool. As you think about neuroscience for your brain, the best exercise for your brain is exercise. Think differently, try something new, because the brain is survival and pattern seeking. It's looking for those things to happen over and over again to make them more reproducible, because connections on the outside of the body build these neural connections on the inside. If your brain is screaming, I'm going to die, when you know you have to go in to have a feedback conversation or to give someone a piece of feedback, but then you don't actually die, those connections on the outside of your body actually build neural connections on the inside, so that maybe the next time the response is not exactly, as heightened as it was the time before.